I'm Scott Lucas. This is today's EAWorldView on Iraq. 5 cold, hard facts about partition and how it might be prevented. As everyone blames everyone else for the crisis in Iraq and scratches their heads about what to do next, here are the 5 cold, hard facts about the military and political situation. Fact 1. You have to deal with the military challenge first. For all the political maneuvers going on, the simple fact is that if you cannot check the insurgency on the battleground, all of those maneuvers are irrelevant. Let's look at this coldly. In the last 2 weeks, insurgents who had already taken parts of western Iraq have seized the second largest city in the country, Mosul. They've taken other cities such as Tikrit. They were within 70 miles of Baghdad on 2 fronts, from the west and from the north-northeast. They have taken many border posts, including almost all of Iraq's border posts with Syria. They, in other words, are advancing, and there is no need for them to compromise, let alone surrender. Now, if you cannot create an Iraqi security force, one which largely crumbled in the last couple of weeks, if you cannot create that force alongside possibly other militias, then it is going to be the insurgency that really holds the cards. Fact 2. There is no national government that will save the situation, at least in the short term. Yeah, I know, all the rhetoric in the last week has been about a national unity government. The Americans are calling for it, the Iranians are calling for it, politicians in Baghdad are calling for it, but it isn't going to work. Here's why. There is no single figure or group of figures in the country that will command respect amongst all communities. The religious communities, Sunni, Shia, the ethnic communities, Arab and Kurd and Turkmen, the tribal communities. No one is going to be able to step in and say, I am a person who can basically lead national reconciliation. Indeed, you could take 5, 10, 20 politicians and they wouldn't be able to do it. So all these efforts are largely moving deck chairs around while the ship sinks. Fact 3. You might begin with a consensus in Baghdad. If you're going to try to hold a country, you start with the capital. Well, in this case, you have possible Sunni politicians, such as the Speaker of Parliament, Osama al-Najafi. You have possible Shia politicians, such as the leader of the Islamic Supreme Council of Iraq, Amr al-Hakim. You have clerics, such as Muqtada al-Sadr. You could try to bring these people together to sit down and say, look, rather than creating militias to fight each other, rather than basically vying for parts of Baghdad, let's find some way to save the city. You might, in the process of the negotiations, agree that you have to get rid of Prime Minister al-Maliki. In fact, you probably should, because the man is poison right now. But whether or not you retain al-Maliki, unless you can come together as a group and show that you can solve Baghdad, reduce the violence, provide services, offer some space where people are not fleeing the city, but comfortable to live in it, unless you can do that, then the game is lost. Point 4. Reach out to the regions and the communities. If Baghdad is secured, then you can start dealing with, negotiating with areas such as Kurdistan, possibly saying, look, here's how you can have autonomy, economic and political autonomy, rather than breaking away with full independence. You could start dealing with Sunni local councils in, for example, parts of western Iraq where the insurgency has gained. You can deal with disaffected Shia communities. You can try to overcome the Sunni-Shia divide by looking at areas where both sides can be represented in local discussions, negotiations, along with, for example, tribal groups. Point 5. If you do not deal with points 1, 2, 3, and 4, what comes next, it will be the fragmentation of Iraq. Now notice, I didn't say partition, because there won't be a clean partition. You won't have a clean breakup which says, here is Kurdistan, here are some Shia areas in the south of the country, here are some Sunni areas in the west of the country, because all groups are represented, for example, in Baghdad. How do you partition a capital? All groups are represented in other areas, such as Mosul and Kirkuk. How do you break up those cities? No, you won't have partition, which will be a nice, easy resolution. You will have fighting and conflict, similar to what we've seen in Baghdad's neighboring country, Syria. Just as Aleppo has gone to hell in a handbasket, look for the same to happen in Iraq. And yes, that means instead of defeating the insurgency, you open up space for other armed groups, not just the bogeymen of the Islamic State of Iraq and Asham, which, by the way, is actually a minority in numbers compared to other armed groups, but to Shia, Sunni, Kurdish militias, all believing that it is not a question of united we stand, but that divided we have to defend ourselves. I'm Scott Lucas, and this has been today's EA Worldview on Iraq.